Before I tell you this story, I need to know something. Have you ever driven through Glacier National Park at night? When the mountains press in so close you can't see stars, when your headlights only reach about 50 feet before the darkness swallows everything, when the only sound is your engine and the knowledge that millions of acres of wilderness surround you on all sides? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you've never been to Montana, to the Blackfeet reservation where the plains meet the Rockies and ancient things still walk, hit that subscribe button. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't just another creepy cop story. This is about coming home to a place I'd spent 12 years running from and learning that some debts follow bloodlines, whether you believe in them or not. My name is Ryan Whitefeather, and 3 months ago my younger sister Emma died on Highway 89 near Marias Pass. Single vehicle accident. That's what the Montana Highway Patrol report said. Her truck left the road at mile marker 34, rolled 3 times, and wrapped around a lodgepole pine. She was 28 years old. The EMTs said she died on impact, but they also said her eyes were open when they found her. Wide open, frozen in an expression that one of them, a 20-year veteran, described as the worst terror he'd ever seen on a corpse. But that wasn't the detail that kept me awake at night in my Denver apartment, staring at the ceiling and replaying every conversation we'd had in those final weeks. It was what the accident investigator noted in his supplemental report, the detail that didn't make it into the official findings. 4 parallel gouges in the hood of Emma's truck, each one about 8 inches long and deep enough to score the metal. Gouges that looked exactly like claw marks from something massive. The investigator wrote that they were probably from debris during the rollover, that a tree branch could have made those marks. But Emma had called me 2 weeks before she died, 3 in the morning, her voice shaking, saying things weren't right on the reservation, that people were disappearing near the mountains, that something was hunting on Highway 89, and the tribal police knew about it, but couldn't stop it. I'd told her she was stressed, that she was working too hard at the community health center, that she should take a vacation. Get away from Browning for a while. Come visit me in Denver. She'd laughed, but there was no humor in it. You left 12 years ago and never looked back, Ryan. You don't understand what it's like here anymore. What's always been here. Those were the last words my sister ever said to me. The drive from Denver to Browning takes about 14 hours if you don't stop. I stopped 3 times, not because I needed to, but because every mile north felt like driving towards something I'd spent my entire adult life avoiding. I'd left the reservation the day after I turned 18, headed to Colorado State, then Denver PD Academy, building a life that had nothing to do with Blackfeet land or the stories our grandmother used to tell before she died. Stories about the mountains and what lived in them. Stories about boundaries and treaties and prices paid in blood. I thought they were just stories, folklore to scare children into staying close to home. Then Emma died with claw marks on her truck and terror frozen in her eyes. The Blackfeet Law Enforcement Services station in Browning, Montana, is a low brick building on the south end of town, sitting where the plains start their rise toward the mountains. Glacier National Park's eastern boundary is visible from the parking lot, that wall of peaks that marks the Continental Divide. In October, the mountains were already snow-capped, brilliant white against blue sky so huge it made me dizzy after years of Denver's urban horizon. I pulled in at 7:45 in the morning, 15 minutes early for my first shift. A handful of patrol vehicles sat in the lot, white SUVs with the distinctive markings of tribal police. Through the building's windows, I could see people moving around inside, the ordinary rhythm of law enforcement starting another day. It looked normal, professional. Nothing like the dread that had been building in my chest since I crossed onto reservation land an hour ago. Captain Joseph Running Crane met me at the door. He was maybe 60, with iron gray hair cut military short and the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades in Montana weather. His handshake was firm, his eyes measuring. He wore his uniform like he'd been born in it. "Officer Whitefeather," he said, "welcome home. Your grandmother would be happy to see you back, even if it took Emma's death to bring you." The blunt assessment hit like a punch, mostly because it was true. "Thank you, sir. I'm ready to start." "Are you?" He gestured for me to follow him inside. 12 years with Denver PD, good record. Made detective after 7 years, solid clearance rate on homicides. Then you put in for transfer to tribal police 2 months ago. Took a 30% pay cut to come back to a place you left without looking back. He glanced at me. "You're here because of Emma. Because you want to know what really happened on Highway 89. The accident report is what we tell the federal authorities and the Montana Highway Patrol because they wouldn't understand anything else." Captain Running Crane stopped at a break room and poured 2 cups of coffee. "But you and I both know your sister didn't die in a simple rollover accident." The coffee was strong enough to strip paint, bitter and hot. I wrapped both hands around the mug, needing something to hold on to. "What do you mean?" He led me down a hallway to his office. The walls were covered with maps of the reservation, patrol schedules, and typical law enforcement materials. But on the wall next to a Blackfeet Nation flag, in a simple, black frame, hung a document that made me stop and stare. It was old, the paper yellowed with age, the text typed on what must have been a manual typewriter. At the top, in faded letters, Blackfeet Law Enforcement Services, Browning District Protocols. Below that, in smaller text, established 1973 by Captain Raymond Heavy Runner. Updated 1988, 2003, 2019. Then 7 numbered rules. 1. Never follow blood trails into the mountains after sunset, regardless of circumstances. Mark location. Return at first light with minimum 3 officers. 2. If you see someone standing motionless on Highway 89 at mile marker 34, do not stop. Do not make eye contact. Do not report location over radio. Continue to station and report in person only. 3. Whistling sounds from 3 different directions simultaneously means immediate retreat to vehicle. Do not investigate source. Do not respond if whistling calls your name. 4. During Chinook winds, no solo patrols in the 2 Medicine area. All responses require minimum 2 units. 5. Remains found in the mountains showing signs of animal predation, but with clothing intact and folded nearby, are not standard wildlife incidents. Secure scene, contact captain immediately. Do not photograph. 6. If motorist requests assistance on Highway 89 between mile markers 32 and 40 after sunset, verify identity through dispatch before approaching. If dispatch cannot verify, do not engage. 7. Objects that appear to be abandoned camping gear in the Cutbank Creek drainage are not to be touched or moved. Mark with GPS, report to captain. Keep all personnel minimum 100 yards distant. I read through the list twice, then looked at Captain Running Crane. This is a joke, right? Some kind of hazing for new officers? His expression didn't change. Your sister violated Protocol 6. 3 months ago, October 15th, she was driving home from a late shift at the health center. 11:45 p.m. She called dispatch and said there was a woman standing on the highway near mile marker 34. Looked injured, asking for help. Dispatch told Emma to wait, that they were sending a patrol unit. Emma said she couldn't wait. The woman looked hurt. Captain Running Crane pulled a file from his desk and opened it. Inside was the accident report I'd already read a dozen times, but also photos I hadn't seen. Emma's truck from multiple angles. The claw marks on the hood, deep and parallel and deliberate. The driver's side window, shattered outward, not inward. And Emma's face, peaceful despite what the EMT had described, except for her eyes. Those protocols sound like superstition until you've been here long enough to understand their survival instructions, he said quietly. They're based on incidents that can't be explained through standard law enforcement training. Things that don't fit into FBI, classifications, or criminal databases. Captain, with respect, I know what you're thinking. I thought the same thing when I started 32 years ago. That these were old stories, traditional beliefs that had no place in modern policing. He closed the file. Then I responded to my first call in the 2 Medicine area during a Chinook wind. Found a campsite with 3 tents, all the gear still there, food half-eaten, but no people. Just tracks leading into the mountains. Human tracks that after about 50 yards started to change. He looked directly at me. By the time I'd followed them 200 yards, they weren't human tracks anymore. My coffee had gone cold. I set it down carefully. What were they? Mountain lion. Big one. But Officer Whitefeather, I watched those tracks transition. Boot prints becoming paw prints over the course of 100 feet. Same depth in the snow. Same stride length showing continuous movement. Not 2 different animals crossing paths. One set of tracks transforming. The rational part of my brain, the part trained in evidence analysis and criminal investigation, rejected what he was saying. But I kept seeing Emma's eyes in those photos, kept hearing her voice on that last phone call. Things aren't right here, Ryan. Something is hunting. A knock on the door frame made me turn. A younger woman stood there, native, maybe 26 or 27, in patrol uniform with her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had the lean build of a runner and eyes that missed nothing. Captain, morning briefing in 5 minutes. Thank you, Sarah. Captain Running Crane gestured to her. Officer Whitefeather, this is Officer Sarah Birdtail. She'll be your partner for the first few weeks while you get oriented. Sarah extended her hand. Her grip was strong, her expression cautious. Heard you worked Denver PD. Big city detective coming to the reservation. That must be quite a change. My sister died here, I said. I'm not here for a change of scenery. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite sympathy, but understanding. Emma was good people. I'm sorry for your loss. She glanced at the protocols on the wall. Captain tell you about the rules yet? He mentioned them. And you think they're bullshit? It wasn't a question. She pulled out her phone and swiped through photos, then handed it to me. Took these last month, east of Hart Butte, up in the foothills. Got a call about livestock kills. Rancher said something was taking his cattle in ways that didn't match typical predator behavior. The photo showed snow, late afternoon light casting long shadows. In the snow were tracks, clear, distinct boot prints, Vibram sole pattern, size 11 or 12, normal stride length. I swiped to the next photo. The same tracks, but 5 feet further along the trail. The boot prints were wider now, the tread pattern distorting. Next photo. The toes of the boots seemed to be elongating, the heel narrowing. Next photo. The prints were clearly transitioning, becoming something else. Next photo. They were paw prints. Mountain lion tracks, massive ones, but the same spacing, the same depth in the snow. the same continuous trail showing unbroken movement. I looked up at Sarah. These could be two different trails that happened to intersect. Could be, she agreed, except I followed them for half a mile. Started at an abandoned hunting cabin where I found human boot prints in the mud inside. Tracked them out into the snow. Watched them change over 20 feet. Then followed the mountain lion tracks for another quarter mile until they led to a dead steer, throat torn out, partially consumed. She took her phone back. The tracks around the kill were all mountain lion. But Officer Whitefeather, I found human teeth marks in that steer, molars, human dental pattern. The break room suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. That's impossible. Yeah. Sarah smiled, but there was no humor in it. Welcome to Blackfeet Law Enforcement Services. Out here, impossible happens every new moon. Captain Running Crane stood up. Morning briefing starts in 3 minutes. After that, you two are on the Western Patrol route. Standard welfare checks, traffic enforcement, whatever calls come in. He looked at me seriously. And Officer Whitefeather, I need you to promise me something. When you see something that doesn't fit your Denver PD training, when you encounter something that violates natural law, you'll follow the protocols. You'll trust what your partner tells you, and you'll keep an open mind long enough to stay alive. I wanted to argue, wanted to say that I was a trained detective, that I dealt in evidence and facts and things that could be proven in court. But I kept seeing those photos. Boot prints becoming paw prints, human teeth in cattle flesh. Emma's eyes frozen wide in terror. I'll follow the protocols, I said. Good, because things are getting active again. We've had 3 missing persons reports in the last 2 months. All of them disappeared near Highway 89. All of them during the new moon. He pulled on his jacket. And the next new moon is in 4 days. The call came through dispatch at 1:30 in the afternoon, 3 hours into my first patrol with Sarah. We were heading north on Highway 89 when the radio crackled to life. Unit 7, we have a welfare check request. Thomas Heavy Runner residence, Hart Butte area. Family reports no contact for 5 days. Last known location is his cabin off Old Trail Road, approximately 8 miles west of town. Sarah reached for the radio. Unit 7 responding. ETA 25 minutes. The road to Thomas Heavy Runner's cabin was barely more than 2 ruts through snow and frozen grass, winding through foothills that rose toward the mountains. The October sun was bright but gave no warmth, and my breath fogged the air every time I exhaled. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees overnight and hadn't climbed much higher. Tell me about Thomas Heavy Runner, I said, as Sarah navigated around a particularly deep washout. He's 83, lives alone since his wife died 6 years ago. Traditional guy, speaks more Blackfeet than English. His granddaughter usually checks on him twice a week, brings him supplies. Sarah's jaw tightened. She tried to visit him 3 days ago, said the door was locked and he wouldn't answer, but she could hear movement inside. When she came back the next day with her father, still no answer. Now nothing. Why wait 5 days to call us? Because people out here know that sometimes it's better not to involve police in certain situations. Sometimes it's better to call a medicine person first. She glanced at me. But his family called us, which means they're worried it's beyond traditional help. The cabin appeared through a stand of bare aspens, a small log structure with a corrugated metal roof. Smoke should have been rising from the chimney in this cold, but the air above the cabin was clear. Sarah parked 50 yards away, and we both sat for a moment, studying the scene. Doors facing west, Sarah said quietly. I looked at the cabin's entrance. She was right. Traditional Blackfeet homes faced east to greet the rising sun, to welcome the day. A west-facing door was wrong, like someone had deliberately violated the proper construction. Maybe it was built by someone who didn't know the traditional way, I offered. Thomas Heavy Runner built this cabin in 1967. He knew exactly which way to face the door. Sarah pulled out her radio. Unit 7 to dispatch. We're on scene at the Heavy Runner residence, starting welfare check. We approached slowly, and with each step, the wrongness intensified. No tracks in the snow around the cabin, except for what looked like animal prints, dozens of them circling the structure. The windows were dark. The door was closed but not locked, hanging slightly ajar. "Mr. Heavy Runner," Sarah called out in Blackfeet, then English. "It's Officer Birdtail from Tribal Police. Your family asked us to check on you." No response, just the wind moving through the aspens and the distant cry of a raven. Sarah tried again, louder. "Mr. Heavy Runner, we're coming in." She pushed the door open. The smell hit immediately. Death and something else. Something acrid and wrong that made my eyes water. Sarah pulled out her flashlight even though it was full daylight outside. The interior of the cabin was much darker than it should have been, like the shadows were thicker here. Thomas Heavy Runner sat in a wooden chair in the center of the single room, facing the door. He'd been dead for days, maybe since his granddaughter's last visit. His skin had the waxy, sunken quality of a corpse in cold temperatures. He was dressed in traditional clothing, his hands folded in his lap, his expression one of absolute terror. His eyes were open, staring at something beyond the door. But it was what surrounded him that made my breath catch. A perfect circle had been drawn on the wooden floor around the chair, maybe 8 feet in diameter. The substance used to create it was gray ash mixed with something that glinted faintly in our flashlight beams. The texture was too fine for wood ash, too uniform. At 4 points around the circle, marking what I realized were the cardinal directions, someone had placed small mounds of the same substance, each about the size of a fist. "Don't touch anything," Sarah said, her voice tight. "Don't step inside that circle." I moved my flashlight beam over the floor. The ash was undisturbed, perfectly smooth, showing no footprints or signs of how it had been placed. "What is this?" "Corpse powder." Sarah was already backing toward the door. Ground human bone mixed with ash from funeral fires. It's used in the worst kind of traditional witchcraft. Someone marked Thomas for the old hunters. "The what?" "We need to call this in, now." She was speaking into her radio, her words coming fast. "Unit 7 to dispatch. We have a deceased male at the Heavy Runner residence. Suspicious circumstances. Request Captain Running Crane and..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Request traditional consultation." I studied the scene, my detective training kicking in despite the horror. Thomas had died of what looked like a heart attack or stroke, probably brought on by sheer terror. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. Just an old man who died afraid in his own home, while someone or something had placed this circle around him. "We need to process this scene," I said. "Photographs, evidence collection." "No." Sarah grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the door. "Look at the windows." I turned. Through the cabin's small windows, I could see the tree line about 40 yards away. 3 figures stood among the aspens, perfectly still. They were human-shaped, but wrong. Too tall, maybe 7 feet, with proportions that didn't quite match. Their arms hung too long, reaching nearly to their knees. And even from this distance, even though they weren't moving, I could see their heads tracking us, following our movements with unnatural precision. "Sarah..." The whistling started. low and melodic, coming from the trees where the figures stood. Then a second whistle, identical in tone, from somewhere to our left, then a third from our right. 3 sources, triangulating us perfectly. Sarah's hand clamped down on my wrist hard enough to hurt. Protocol 3. We leave now. She pulled me out of the cabin and we moved quickly, but didn't run toward our vehicle. Every instinct screamed to sprint, but Sarah kept her pace measured, controlled. When I started to turn my head to look at the figures, she hissed, "Eyes forward! Don't look at them directly." We reached the patrol SUV and Sarah started the engine immediately. As we pulled away, I couldn't help but check the side mirror. The 3 figures were still there, still motionless. But now they were closer, maybe 20 yards from the cabin, though I hadn't seen them move. One of them raised an arm in what might have been a wave or a gesture of acknowledgement. We drove for 10 minutes in silence before Sarah pulled over and killed the engine. Her hands were shaking. What the hell were those things? Old hunters, skin takers. The names vary depending on which elder you ask, but it's all the same. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. They're what people become when they walk too far down the dark path. When they kill family members to gain power. When they learn to wear animal skins and take animal form. They're not human anymore, not really, even when they look human. I thought about the tracks in her photos, boot prints becoming mountain lion prints. And someone used that corpse powder to mark Thomas Heavy Runner for them. To call them to him, yes, like leaving bait. Sarah started the engine again. We need to get back to the station. Captain needs to know about this immediately. That evening, I sat in the small cabin I'd rented on the edge of Browning, trying to process what I'd seen. The rational part of my brain kept insisting there had to be an explanation. 3 tall men playing some sick joke. The whistling was just coincidence, birds or wind through rocks. The corpse powder was flour or something equally mundane. But I kept seeing those figures, the way they moved without seeming to move, the way their proportions were just wrong enough to trigger some primal recognition that they weren't human. Around 10 o'clock, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard it. Ryan, my sister's voice, coming from outside the cabin, weak, confused, frightened. Ryan, I'm so cold. Please let me in. I've been walking since the accident. I can't find my way home. Every hair on my body stood up. Emma had been dead for 3 months. I'd been at her funeral, watched them lower her casket into the frozen ground. Ryan, please. The voice was perfect, exactly Emma's cadence, her slight lisp on the S sounds. I'm scared. Something's out here with me. Let me in. My hand moved toward the door handle before I caught myself. Protocol 7 said if you hear whistling from 3 directions, retreat. But there was no protocol for hearing your dead sister's voice calling from the darkness. Ryan! More urgent now, tinged with panic. It's coming. Please, I need help. Then I heard it. Scratching. Sharp, deliberate, metal on metal. Something with claws was dragging them across the cabin's aluminum siding, slowly, like testing the strength of the walls. Emma's voice changed, became my own voice, speaking from right outside the window. You can't hide in there forever, Ryan. We know you're home. We know you have the blood. Your sister tasted so good, so pure and terrified. You'll taste even better. The scratching intensified, moving around the cabin in a circle. Not one source, but multiple. Like several somethings were surrounding the building, testing every surface, looking for a way in. I backed away from the door, from the windows, pulling out my phone with shaking hands. Sarah answered on the first ring. It's outside my cabin, I whispered, using Emma's voice. Don't open the door. Don't look out the windows. Don't answer it no matter what it says. Her voice was hard, professional. I'm 10 minutes away. Captain's sending another unit too. You're going to be fine, but Ryan, you need to stay inside and stay quiet. The scratching stopped. The voices stopped. Complete silence, so absolute it felt like pressure in my ears. Then something massive hit the cabin wall hard enough to shake the entire structure, and I understood with perfect clarity why Thomas Heavy Runner had died with that expression of terror frozen on his face. Sarah and Captain Running Crane arrived within minutes of each other, followed by 2 more patrol units. They found me sitting on my bed with my service weapon drawn, staring at the door, while something circled the cabin outside, making sounds that shifted between animal growls and human laughter. When they entered with flashlights and sage smoke, whatever had been outside vanished into the darkness so completely it left no tracks in the frost-covered ground. "You're staying at my place tonight," Sarah said, and it wasn't a suggestion. "And tomorrow, we're taking you to see Alice Mad Plume." I spent the rest of that night on Sarah's couch, listening to her 2 Rottweilers pace nervously by the windows, growling at things I couldn't see. Neither of us slept. The next morning, Captain Running Crane called us into his office before shift started. He had his computer pulled up, a database I didn't recognize displayed on the screen. 17 disappearances, he said without preamble. Over the last 5 years, all of them on Highway 89 between mile markers 32 and 38, all of them during the new moon phase, all of them between midnight and 3 in the morning. He clicked through the files, each one showing a photo and basic details. Men and women ranging from 19 to 56 years old. Some were Blackfeet, others were white tourists or travelers passing through. No pattern in age, gender, or background, but every single case file had the same location data, the same time frame, the same lack of evidence. "Emma was number 16, I said, my voice hollow. "Yes, and last month, Daniel Big Nose was number 17, 23 years old, driving home from his shift at the casino in Browning. Called his girlfriend at 11:45 p.m., said he'd be home in 20 minutes. His truck was found at mile marker 36, driver's door open, engine still running, no blood, no signs of struggle, just gone." Captain Running Crane closed the file. "New moon is in 3 days. If the pattern holds, someone else is going to disappear." "What about suspects?" I asked. "Witnesses? Security footage from the casino?" "We have 3 persons of interest. Darren Spotted Horse, 34. Kyle Three Bears, 31. Marcus Three Bears, 28. Brothers. All 3 of them have been seen in the area of multiple disappearances, but we've never been able to place them at the actual scenes. They're careful." He pulled up mugshots. 3 native men, all with the hard look of people who'd spent time in the system. Darren and Kyle have priors for assault. Marcus did 18 months in Deer Lodge for aggravated battery, and all 3 of them were known associates of Thomas Heavy Runner before he died. Sarah leaned forward, studying the photos. "You think they're the ones who marked Thomas with corpse powder?" "I think they're walking a very dark path, and I think they're the reason Alice Mad Plume has been asking to see Officer Whitefeather since the moment he arrived on the reservation." The name meant nothing to me, but Sarah's expression changed to something like reverence. "Alice wants to see him?" "She called me at 6 this morning, said the blood had returned to Blackfeet land, and she needed to speak with Ryan before the next new moon." Captain Running Crane looked at me. "Alice Mad Plume is 90 years old, and she's the most powerful medicine woman in the northern Rockies. When she says she needs to see someone, you go. Alice Mad Plume lived in a traditional lodge about 15 miles north of Browning, set in a valley where the plains began their climb toward the mountains. The structure was built from lodgepole pine and canvas, heated by a wood stove, and looked like it had been standing in that exact spot for 100 years. Smoke rose from the center opening, and protection symbols had been painted on every surface in red and yellow ochre. Sarah parked 50 yards away. Let me do the talking first. Alice speaks English but prefers Blackfeet. She's going to test you, see if you're worth her time. Be respectful, be honest, and don't lie about anything. She'll know. The old woman who emerged from the lodge was tiny, maybe 4'10", with white hair braided to her waist and a face mapped with 1,000 wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp and bright, missing nothing. She looked at me, and something passed over her face, recognition or satisfaction. "Mountain Singer blood," she said in English, her voice surprisingly strong. "I told your grandmother 62 years ago that her children would come home. She didn't believe me, said she was leaving the reservation and never coming back." Alice smiled, showing gaps where teeth had been. But blood calls to blood. Her granddaughter came back 8 years ago. Now her grandson returns, both marked by the skin takers. "You knew my grandmother?" "Mary Whitefeather, born Mary Mountain Singer. We were girls together, learned the ceremonies together. She had the gift, the sight, could see between worlds. But she fell in love with a white man and chose to leave." Alice gestured for us to enter the lodge. She thought distance would protect her family from the old ways. She was wrong. Inside, the lodge was warm and smelled of sage and sweet grass. The walls were covered with symbols, hundreds of them, painted and carved and burned into the wood. I recognized some from the protection protocols, but others were completely unfamiliar, older, more complex. Alice settled onto a pile of blankets and furs, studying me with those sharp eyes. "Your grandmother was Mountain Singer clan. We are the ones who walk between worlds, who maintain the boundaries, who speak with the old powers and keep them contained. For 200 years, the Mountain Singer clan has protected the Blackfeet people from what lives in the mountains. We made the first treaty with the Skin Takers in 1726 at the Boundary Stone near Hart Butte. We renewed it every generation with blood and ceremony and constant vigilance." She reached out and touched my face with fingers that were surprisingly warm. "The blood remembers even when the mind forgets. Your grandmother tried to dilute it by leaving, by marrying outside the clan. But it stayed strong. Your sister had it. You have it. The Skin Takers can smell it, taste it in the air. That's why they took Emma. That's why they're hunting you now." My hands were shaking. "Why didn't my grandmother tell us? Why didn't she warn us?" "Because she thought if she never spoke of it, if she raised her children away from Blackfeet land, the old powers would forget about her family." Alice's expression was sad. "But the Skin Takers don't forget. They're patient. They waited until Emma came home, until she was alone on that highway during the new moon. They waited until you came back. And now, they're testing you, seeing if you'll run like your grandmother did, or if you'll stand and fight like the Mountain Singer clan always has." Sarah spoke quietly from where she stood by the door. "Can you help him?" "I can teach him what he should have learned as a child if his grandmother hadn't been so afraid. But 3 days is not enough time to learn what usually takes decades." Alice pulled a bundle from beside her, wrapped in deer hide and tied with sinew. "This is emergency protection. Sweetgrass blessed in the old way. Bare root gathered during the last full moon. white sage from the high country, and this. She opened a small leather pouch, showing ash that glinted faintly in the firelight. Ash from the first boundary stone, from the place where we made the original treaty. As long as you carry this, the skin takers cannot take you easily. They can threaten, frighten, hurt, but they cannot consume you without great effort and great cost to themselves. She pressed the bundle into my hands. It was warm, almost hot, and the moment I touched it, I felt something shift. Like a pressure I hadn't known was there suddenly eased. But carrying protection is not enough. You need to understand what you're facing. Alice's voice became harder, took on the cadence of teaching. The skin takers are not human, not anymore. They were once Blackfeet, once part of our people. But they chose the dark path. They killed their own family members to gain power, learned to wear animal skins, and take animal form. Each transformation makes them less human and more something else. Eventually, they transcend entirely, become the entity that hunts these mountains. The first taker, the walker between, the thing your people call Xistsi Komawaka in the old language. How do we stop them? You can't kill them with bullets or knives. They've given up their humanity, so human weapons mean nothing. Alice began pulling out other items, a pouch of corn pollen, small stones carved with symbols, bundles of dried plants I didn't recognize. But you can banish them. You can force them back across the boundary, back to the between spaces where they belong. It requires the 3 offerings that were made in the original treaty: acknowledgement of their power, respect for the boundary, and the choice to sacrifice something precious for the protection of your people. Over the next 2 days, whenever I wasn't on patrol, I was with Alice. She taught me chants in Blackfeet, making me repeat phrases until my throat was raw and the words flowed without thinking. She taught me how to draw protection symbols in ash and corn pollen, how to make proper offerings, how to recognize when the boundary between worlds was thin and dangerous. It was like trying to drink from a fire hose, decades of traditional knowledge compressed into hours of frantic learning. You won't master this in 2 days, Alice said on the second evening as we sat by her fire. But you'll know enough to survive. And maybe, if the old powers favor you, enough to close the door these skin takers are trying to open. What door? The final transformation. They've been building power for years, taking lives during the new moon, growing stronger. 17 victims. Your sister was number 16 because of her bloodline, because Mountain Singer blood makes the strongest offering. Daniel Bignose was 17 because they needed 1 more to complete the circle. She looked at me with ancient eyes. You're meant to be 18. The final offering, the one that gives them enough power to transcend completely, to become the entity itself rather than just its servants. The weight of it crashed down on me. Emma hadn't died in a random accident. She'd been hunted, selected, murdered, as part of some ritual I was only beginning to understand. We need to find them, I said. Darren Spotted Horse and the 3 Bears brothers. We need to stop them before the new moon. Sarah and I spent every moment between training sessions investigating. We interviewed families of the missing, looked for connections, tracked movements. A pattern emerged. All 3 suspects had been seen near Hart Butte in the weeks before Thomas Heavy Runner's death. They'd been asking questions about old ceremonial sites, about boundaries and treaties, and multiple witnesses placed them near Highway 89 on the nights people disappeared. On the 3rd day, following a tip from a rancher who'd seen lights in an abandoned line shack up in the foothills, we drove out to investigate. The shack was a century old, built by cattlemen who used to summer their herds in the high country. No one had used it legally in decades. We parked half a mile away and approached on foot, weapons drawn. Through the cracked window, I could see candlelight inside. "Call for backup," I whispered to Sarah. "We're 30 minutes from the nearest unit. By the time they get here, call them anyway." She keyed her radio quietly while I moved to the door. It was unlocked, hanging slightly open. Inside, I could see a workspace that made my stomach turn. Grinding stones covered with gray powder sat on a makeshift table. Clay jars filled with ash lined the walls, and spread across every surface were photos, 17 of them. 17 people who'd disappeared from Highway 89, their faces staring out from Polaroids and printed pictures. Emma's face was among them, a photo I recognized from her employee ID at the health center. Someone had written on it in ash, the letters smudged but readable. "First offering, mountain singer blood." My hands clenched into fists. Rage, pure and hot, washed through me. "Ryan," Sarah whispered urgently from behind me. "We need to leave. Now." But I was staring at something else. A journal, leather-bound, lying open on the table. The pages were covered with handwriting documenting transformations, ceremonies, kills. Each entry dated, each one describing in clinical detail how it felt to wear animal skin, to feel bones breaking and reforming, to taste blood with animal teeth while maintaining human consciousness. The last entry was dated yesterday. Third moon rises tomorrow. 18 offerings complete the circle. The final transformation begins at mile marker 34. The mountain singer blood will open the door. We will become what we were always meant to be. "They're planning something tomorrow night," I said. "At mile marker 34, where Emma died. Ryan, look." I turned. Sarah was staring at something pinned to the wall behind the door. Emma's driver's license, the plastic cracked and stained with something dark. And next to it, a small medicine bundle exactly like the one Alice had given me. But this one had been desecrated, torn open, the contents scattered and mixed with ash. "They took this from her," Sarah said quietly. "After they killed her, they took her protection and corrupted it." The rage crystallized into something colder, harder. Purpose. A voice spoke from the doorway, making us both spin around. Detective Whitefeather. Marcus, 3 bears stood there blocking our exit. He was maybe 6'2", heavily muscled, with his black hair pulled back and eyes that were completely wrong. Not just dark, but black, pupil and iris merged into voids that reflected no light. When he smiled, I saw too many teeth. "Your sister screamed your name before she understood what we were becoming. She fought so hard, clawed at the windows, called for help that never came." He tilted his head at an angle that was just slightly too far. "She tasted like summer grass and sage smoke, pure, terrified, the best offering we've had in 5 years. Sarah's hand moved toward her weapon. Marcus laughed, and the sound had harmonics that shouldn't have come from a human throat. "Bullets won't help you, Officer Birdtail. We've already given up everything that makes bullets matter. We're not human anymore. We're becoming what hunts in the mountains, what walked this land before your people, before any people." He took a step into the shack, and tomorrow night, with the 18th offering, the transformation completes. We become eternal. I pulled out the protection bundle Alice had given me, holding it between us like a shield. Marcus recoiled slightly, his black eyes fixed on the leather pouch. "Ash from the boundary stone," he hissed. "The old woman gave you protection. Smart. That will keep us from taking you easily tonight." He smiled again. But tomorrow, during the new moon, when we complete the ceremony at mile marker 34, all the protection in the world won't matter. The door will open, the entity will feed, and you'll join your sister in whatever comes after death. Then he was gone, moving faster than anything human should move, leaving only the smell of decay and the echo of his laughter. Sarah grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the door. We need every officer, every tribal ranger, every FBI agent we can get. We need to stop whatever they're planning tomorrow night. But I was still staring at Emma's license pinned to the wall, at the words "First Offering" written in the ash of ground human bones, and I knew with absolute certainty that tomorrow night on Highway 89, this was all going to end one way or another. Captain Running Crane assembled everyone in the briefing room at 5 p.m., 8 hours before the new moon reached its peak. 7 BLES officers, 4 tribal rangers, and 2 FBI agents who'd driven up from the Great Falls field office that morning. The tall white agent introduced himself as Foster, the shorter Navajo agent as Chen. Foster looked skeptical about the entire operation. Chen's expression was carefully neutral, but I caught him glancing at the protocols on the wall with something like recognition. We have credible intelligence that suspects Darren Spotted Horse, Kyle Three Bears, and Marcus Three Bears are planning some kind of ritual tonight on Highway 89 near mile marker 34, Captain Running Crane said, pulling up a topographic map on the projector. Based on evidence recovered from their workshop and information from traditional sources, we believe this ritual is connected to 17 disappearances over the last 5 years, including Officer Whitefeather's sister, Emma. Agent Foster raised his hand. With respect, Captain, what exactly are we preventing here? If these 3 suspects show up, we arrest them on the evidence you found in the line shack: corpse desecration, possession of human remains, possibly murder if we can connect them to the disappearances. But talking about rituals and... He glanced at his notes. Traditional sources makes this sound less like a law enforcement operation and more like something else. Agent Foster, Chen said quietly. I grew up on the Navajo Nation. I've seen things that don't fit into FBI training manuals. If Captain Running Crane says we need to take traditional elements seriously, I'm inclined to believe him. Foster looked like he wanted to argue but caught himself. Fine. What's the tactical plan? We deployed in 3 units at dusk, positioning ourselves at overlapping vantage points covering mile marker 34. Sarah and I were Unit 7, parked on a rise 300 yards north of the highway with night vision equipment and clear radio contact. Captain Running Crane commanded Unit 1 at the southern position. The tribal rangers formed Unit 3 to the west. The FBI agents stayed mobile, ready to respond wherever needed. The temperature dropped steadily as the sun set, falling from 20 degrees to 10, then to 0. By 9 p.m., it was -8 and still dropping. My breath came out in clouds so thick I could barely see through them. The night vision scope showed the highway in eerie green detail, empty and still, nothing moving except occasional wind-blown snow. Unit 7 to all units, Sarah said quietly into the radio. We have movement. 3 individuals approaching mile marker 34 on foot from the east. Through the scope, I watched 3 figures emerge from the darkness. Even in night vision, I recognized them from the mugshots. Darren Spotted Horse in the lead, the 3 Bears brothers flanking him. They moved to an abandoned pull-off area, the same spot where Emma's truck had been found 3 months ago. All units, hold position, Captain Running Crane ordered. Observe and document. The 3 men began to work. They moved with practiced efficiency, pulling items from backpacks and arranging them on the frozen ground. Through the scope, I could see them creating a circle, using the same gray ash mixture we'd found around Thomas Heavy Runner's body. Corpse powder, ground from human bones and funeral ash, spread in a perfect ring, maybe 20 feet across. At 4 points around the circle, they placed larger piles of the substance, marking the cardinal directions. Then they stood in the center, forming a triangle, and began to chant. The sound carried across the distance, even though they couldn't possibly be that loud, deep, rhythmic, in a language that made my teeth ache. Not Blackfeet, not English, something older that humans maybe weren't meant to speak. What the hell are they saying? Foster's voice came over the radio, the skepticism replaced by unease. It's a summoning. Alice Mad Plume's voice crackled through. She'd insisted on monitoring the radio from the station, and Captain Running Crane had agreed. They're calling the first taker, Sitsikamwaka, the walker between. Ryan, you need to be ready. The chanting grew louder, and then I saw it beginning. Darren's spotted horse screamed, not in pain, but in what sounded like ecstasy. His body convulsed, dropping to all fours, and I watched through the scope as his spine bent in ways that shouldn't be possible. His clothes tore as his body expanded, muscles bulging and reforming. His hands splayed on the ground, fingers elongating and curving into claws while fur erupted through skin. Kyle and Marcus were transforming too, all three of them screaming and laughing at once, their bodies breaking and rebuilding themselves. Bones cracked loud enough to hear from 300 yards away. Their faces stretched, jaws dislocating and reforming into something between human and mountain lion. Their legs bent backward, restructuring to match animal hindquarters. Jesus Christ, Foster breathed over the radio. Are you seeing this? Within 2 minutes, where 3 men had stood, 3 massive mountain lions now paced inside the circle. But they were wrong, impossibly large, maybe 400 pounds each, with proportions that didn't match any natural cat. And their eyes, even through night vision, showed intelligence that was distinctly human. Then the thing behind them began to materialize. It didn't walk from the forest or climb from the ground. It simply formed out of the air itself, like reality was bending to allow something through from somewhere else. 8 feet tall, skeletal thin, with limbs that were too long and bent at too many joints. It was covered in white fur matted with dark stains that might have been blood or rot. Its face was part human skull, part mountain lion, with a jaw that could unhinge like a snake's. And from its head rose antlers, massive and branching like an old mule deer's, but bleached white and carved with symbols I didn't recognize. The entity opened its eyes, red, glowing red, like coals in a fire. And despite the quarter-mile distance, despite being hidden behind night vision equipment in a vehicle, I felt it look directly at me, felt it see me, recognize me, know exactly who I was and what blood ran in my veins. All units. Captain Running Crane's voice was tight, controlled. We have hostile activity. Move to intercept. But before anyone could move, the entity threw back its head and screamed. The sound was nothing an animal could make, nothing human could make. A frequency that felt like it was shredding the inside of my skull. And in response, from the forest on both sides of the highway, came answering calls. Mountain lions, a dozen of them, emerging from the trees, moving toward the road. Some looked normal, natural cats attracted by some call I couldn't understand. Others moved wrong, too fast, with that same human intelligence in their eyes. All units, we have multiple hostiles, Captain Running Crane ordered. Units 1 and 3, block Highway 89 north and south. Unit 7, maintain observation. FBI, prepare for possible arrests. The 3 transformed skin takers exploded into motion. They burst from the circle and sprinted toward our positions, covering ground with impossible speed. Behind them, The entity and its pack of cats followed, a wave of fur and claws and red eyes. "Unit 3 is engaging," one of the rangers shouted over the radio, followed by gunfire. "Suspects are not responding to verbal commands. Shots fired. Shots. They're not going down. They're not. All units. Fall back," Captain Running Crane ordered. "Tactical retreat to secondary positions." Sarah had the engine started before he finished speaking. We pulled out fast, hitting Highway 89 and accelerating south. In the rearview mirror, I could see the other units doing the same, a convoy of patrol vehicles racing through the darkness with something pursuing them. "Unit 1 to all units," Captain Running Crane's voice came through strained. "We have contacts pacing us, 4, no 6, running alongside vehicles at 95 miles per hour. Through Sarah's window, I saw one of them. A massive mountain lion keeping perfect pace with our vehicle, its muscles flowing like liquid under its fur, its eyes glowing in our headlights with that horrible human intelligence. It turned its head to look at us, and I swear to God it smiled before leaping onto the hood of Unit 3 behind us. "Unit 3, we're under attack!" The ranger driving screamed into the radio. "It's on the hood! It's..." The lion smashed through the windshield. Unit 3 swerved violently, careened off the highway, and rolled 3 times before coming to rest in a ditch. The lion leaped clear before impact, landing on all 4s and immediately sprinting back toward the entity. "Unit 3 is down," Sarah reported, her voice remarkably steady. "Keep moving," Captain Running Crane ordered. "Daniel, if you can hear me, stay with your vehicle. We're coming back for you." But we couldn't go back. The highway behind us was full of them now, at least 10 cats moving like a coordinated pack, herding us forward, keeping us separated from the fallen unit. Agent Foster tried to break away, to loop back for the ranger, and 3 cats converged on his vehicle, forcing him to swerve back into formation. We were doing 100 miles per hour now, flying through the darkness with the pack pacing us. Then I saw it ahead in our headlights. The entity standing in the middle of Highway 89 at mile marker 34, perfectly still, waiting. "Sarah, there's something in the road. I see it." She didn't slow down, couldn't slow down with the pack behind us. We hit the entity at 85 miles per hour, and instead of impact, instead of resistance, we passed through it like it wasn't solid at all. The temperature inside the vehicle dropped instantly from 40 degrees to what felt like -40. Frost formed on every surface inside and out, coating the windshield in ice so thick Sarah couldn't see. The steering wheel froze under my hands where I braced against the dashboard. Our breath came out in clouds that crystallized in midair, and Emma's voice spoke from the back seat, clear and close and wrong. "You should have saved me, Ryan. You should have come home when I called. You should have believed me when I said something was hunting. Now you're going to die the same way I did, understanding too late that some things are real whether you believe in them or not." Sarah hit the brakes, but the road was ice now. Everything was ice. We spun sideways, slid off the highway, and crashed through a snowbank into the forest. The impact deployed the airbags, and for a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, just tasted blood from where I'd bitten my tongue. "Ryan," Sarah's voice muffled through the ringing in my ears. "Ryan, we have to move." I shoved the airbag down. Through the cracked windshield, I could see pine trees surrounding us. We'd ended up maybe 50 yards off the highway, deep in the 2 medicine area where Protocol 4 said never to patrol alone. The radio was sparking, damaged in the crash, broadcasting only static and occasional fragments of other units calling for backup. Separated from the main group. "Daniel's vehicle is empty. There's blood. Can't reach Unit 7, repeat, can't reach..." Sarah tried the engine. Dead. She tried her cell phone. No signal. Too deep in the mountains. The temperature outside was -30 according to the dashboard display that flickered and died. And in the trees around us, I could see movement. Large shapes circling, more than we could count, their eyes reflecting the dim glow of our emergency lights. "Alice gave you the protection bundle," Sarah said quietly, pulling out her own medicine pouch. "It keeps them from taking us easily. But Ryan, we can't stay in this vehicle. We need to move." "Move where?" "The boundary stone. Heart Butte. It's maybe 2 miles northeast of here. If we can reach it before they coordinate, before the entity fully manifests." She met my eyes. "Alice said you have to complete the ceremony at the boundary stone. That's the only way to close the door they've opened." In the trees, something massive moved closer. Through the shattered side window, I caught a glimpse of white fur matted with blood, antlers carved with ancient symbols, red eyes that burned like fire. 2 miles in -30-degree weather with those things hunting us, I said. Sarah checked her weapon, though we both knew bullets wouldn't help. "You have a better idea?" I didn't. So we opened the doors and stepped out into the Montana winter night, where ancient things waited to hunt us through the mountains, and my only hope of survival was completing a ceremony I'd barely learned from a 90-year-old medicine woman who said my blood made me both target and warrior. We made it maybe 30 yards from the crashed vehicle before Sarah stumbled and went down hard. She tried to get up, gasped, and pressed a hand to her ribs. "I'm fine," she said through gritted teeth. "Just got the wind knocked out." But when she coughed, blood flecked her lips. Internal injuries, broken ribs at minimum, possibly punctured lung. In -30-degree weather, 2 miles from help, with predators circling in the darkness. Agent Chen appeared from behind us, moving fast through the snow. His suit was completely inadequate for the cold, but he didn't seem to notice. He had his weapon drawn and his phone out, trying desperately to get a signal. "Radio's dead in my vehicle too," he said. "We're cut off from the main group." Through the trees, I could see shapes moving. Large cats pacing at the edge of visibility, their eyes reflecting what little moonlight filtered through the clouds, and beyond them, taller, the entity's white form drifting between tree trunks like smoke, there and not there, never quite solid. "We need to secure a defensive position," I said, helping Sarah lean against a fallen log. "Find shelter, start a fire." "No." Sarah grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong despite her injuries. "You know what this is, what you have to do. Alice told you. Protocol 7. When bloodline is required, you walk alone. I'm not leaving you. You have to." She coughed again, more blood. "Ryan, you're the only one who can renew the treaty. The only one with Mountain Singer blood. If you don't reach the boundary stone and complete the ceremony, everyone dies. Not just us. Everyone those things hunt for the next 100 years. The entity's voice drifted through the trees, speaking in chorus, a dozen voices layered over each other. I recognized some of them from the missing persons files, others I didn't know. And underneath them all, Emma's voice, clear and cold. Emma fought so hard, clawed at the windows of her truck, called for help that never came, called for you specifically, Ryan. Where's Ryan? Why isn't Ryan here? But you weren't there. You left 12 years ago and never came back. Left her alone to face what hunts these mountains. The words hit like physical blows because they were true. I had left. I'd abandoned the reservation, my family, everything I was supposed to protect, because I was angry and scared and convinced the old ways were just superstition. Agent Chen moved to Sarah's other side, helping support her. Wait. I'll stay with Officer Birdtail. We'll hold here as long as we can. He met my eyes. My grandmother was Navajo. She taught me about the old powers, about boundaries and treaties, and the price of maintaining them. I know what you have to do, Officer Whitefeather, and I know you're probably not coming back from it, but it matters that you try. The damaged radio on Sarah's belt crackled with static. Then, impossibly clear through the interference, came Alice Mad Plume's voice. It shouldn't have been possible. The radio was destroyed, and even if it worked, we were too deep in the mountains for transmission. But I heard her anyway, speaking directly into my mind or my soul, or whatever part of me carried mountain singer blood. Ryan Whitefeather, your grandmother sang you the treaty song when you were 5 years old. You remember? Close your eyes and remember. I closed my eyes, and I did remember. Late nights in Denver when I was a child, before my parents moved us away from the reservation permanently. My grandmother visiting, sitting by my bed, singing in Blackfeet while snow fell outside. I hadn't understood the words then, thought it was just a lullaby. But now, with Alice's voice echoing in my head, the meaning crystallized. It was the treaty song, the words spoken in 1726, when the Mountain Singer clan had first made peace with the Skin Takers, establishing the boundary that kept them contained in the high mountains, kept them from hunting freely among the Blackfeet people. The blood remembers. Alice's voice continued. Go to the boundary stone at Hart Butte. Northeast from your position, 2 miles. You'll know the path because your grandmother walked it, and her grandmother before her, and every mountain singer back to the first treaty. The stone will call to you. I opened my eyes. Through the trees to the northeast, I could see what might have been a path, or maybe just a gap between trunks, but something pulled me toward it, a sensation like magnetism or gravity or blood calling to blood. Go, Sarah said. We'll give you as much time as we can. Agent Chen raised his weapon toward the circling shapes. Make it count, Officer Whitefeather. I ran. The forest was a nightmare of snow and darkness and cold so intense it burned my lungs with every breath. The protection bundle Alice had given me hung around my neck, warm against my chest, the only heat in a world of ice. Behind me, I heard gunfire. Sarah and Chen engaging the cats, buying me seconds or minutes or whatever time they could before being overwhelmed. The entity paced me through the trees, always visible in peripheral vision, never quite where I looked directly. It spoke in that chorus of voices, Emma's rising above the others. You can stop running, Ryan. You can't escape us. We're in your blood, in your bones, in every cell that carries Mountain Singer heritage. Your grandmother tried to run and failed. Your sister tried to fight and failed. What makes you think you'll succeed where they couldn't? My legs burned. My face had gone numb from the cold. Ice crystals formed in my beard, in my eyebrows, making it hard to see. But the path ahead remained clear, that magnetic pull growing stronger with every step. Then I heard screaming, humans screaming, raw and terrified, echoing through the forest from somewhere ahead. Daniel Bignose, the tribal ranger who'd been taken from his vehicle during the chase. He was still alive. The path led me to a clearing where ancient stone broke through the snow. The boundary stone, massive and weathered, covered in petroglyphs that glowed with faint blue light. The carvings were old, older than the Blackfeet Nation, older than any tribe I knew. This place had been sacred long before my people came to these mountains, and the treaty made here in 1726 was just the most recent in a long chain of agreements between humans and things that weren't human. Daniel was tied to the stone with sinew, his uniform torn, his face bloody, but his eyes were alert, tracking movement around the clearing. Standing in a triangle formation around him were 3 men. Darren Spotted Horse and Kyle and Marcus Three Bears, back in human form, chanting in that language that made my teeth ache. They stopped when I entered the clearing. Darren smiled. Mountain Singer blood, right on time. The entity materialized in the center of their triangle, fully manifested now, 8 feet of white fur and bone and ancient hunger. Its red eyes fixed on me, and when it spoke, the chorus of voices synchronized into a single terrible harmony. 18 offerings to complete the circle. Emma Whitefeather was first because Mountain Singer blood opens doors. Daniel Big Nose was second, taken at the moment of transformation, his fear feeding our power. And you, Ryan Whitefeather, you're the third and final. With your death, we ascend. We become eternal. We transcend the boundary between human and animal, between flesh and spirit. We become the walker between made manifest, and no treaty will contain us ever again. It took a step closer, and I could smell it now. Death and decay and something else. Something that might have been sage smoke and summer grass. Emma's scent. The thing wearing her voice like a mask. Your sister tasted like sage and summer grass. Pure. Terrified. The best offering we've had in 80 years. She understood at the end what she was part of, what her death would create. She stopped fighting. Accepted it. You can too. Join us. Accept the transformation. Understand what your sister felt in those final moments. Gain power that would let you walk between worlds, that would make you hunter instead of prey. The offer was seductive. I could feel it pulling at something deep inside, some part of me that wanted to understand, to gain control, to never be afraid again. The same temptation that had led Darren and Kyle and Marcus down this path. The same temptation that had probably led others before them, going back centuries. But I also remembered Alice's teachings, remembered my grandmother's songs, remembered what it meant to be Mountain Singer clan, to be the ones who maintained boundaries, who protected rather than prayed. I pulled out the protection bundle and opened it. The ash from the first boundary stone spilled into my palm, glowing faintly in the moonlight. I approached the stone, careful not to break the triangle formation, but moving close enough to touch the ancient petroglyphs. I refuse your offer, I said clearly. I refuse transformation. I refuse to become what you are. The entity hissed, and the 3 skin takers moved toward me. But I was already speaking the words Alice had taught me, the first offering. Acknowledgement of power. Ksistikamoka, I acknowledge you. First taker, walker between, the one who hunted before humans knew these mountains. I acknowledge your age, your strength, your place in the world that was. The entity stopped, surprised or intrigued or bound by some compulsion I didn't understand. The second offering, respect for the boundary. I pulled out my knife and drew it across my left palm. Blood welled up, hot against the cold air, and I pressed my hand to the boundary stone. My blood mixed with the glowing ash, and the petroglyphs blazed brighter. I offer blood freely given, not taken by force. I offer respect for the boundary established in 1726 by my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother. The treaty that keeps your hunger contained, that protects my people, that maintains balance between your world and ours. The entity shrieked, a sound that shattered ice on nearby trees. The 3 skin takers collapsed to their knees, convulsing, their borrowed power faltering. The third offering. Choice. I choose my people over power. I choose protection over predation. I choose to walk the mountain singer path, to maintain boundaries, to renew the treaty my ancestors made. I spoke the words in Blackfeet now, the language flowing from somewhere deep in my blood. The boundary is renewed. The door is closed. You are banished back to the between spaces where you belong. Light exploded from the boundary stone, brilliant white blue, blazing from every petroglyph like they'd been filled with lightning. The entity screamed, that chorus of 17 voices splitting apart into individual cries of rage and terror and denial. No! The treaty held for 200 years. The treaty was broken. We were free. We were becoming. But the light was pulling it apart, unraveling its form, dragging it backward through some dimensional tear I could almost see, almost understand. Its white fur dissolved into smoke, its bones scattered into nothing, its red eyes winked out like candles in a storm. Darren, Kyle, and Marcus collapsed completely, their bodies convulsing as the power they'd stolen was ripped away. They screamed, bones cracking, fur receding, until they lay in the snow as just men, broken and sobbing and human again. The boundary stone's light faded slowly, leaving afterimages burned into my vision. The petroglyphs settled back to that faint blue glow, old again, patient, waiting for the next generation to renew the treaty. I cut Daniel loose. He was hypothermic, traumatized, but alive. Together, leaning on each other, we stumbled back toward where I'd left Sarah and Chen. Dawn was breaking when we found them, still holding their defensive position, Sarah unconscious but breathing, Chen reloading his weapon with frozen fingers. The cats had vanished with the entity's banishment, melting back into the mountains like they'd never been. Did it work? Chen asked, his voice rough from cold. I showed him my palm, still bleeding from the offering, the blood glowing faintly in the early light. The boundary is renewed. The door is closed. He nodded once, then keyed his radio. Somehow with dawn, the equipment was working again. This is Agent Chen. We have survivors at coordinates. He checked his GPS. We need immediate medical evacuation and send tribal rangers to the Heart Butte boundary stone. We have 3 suspects in custody. As helicopter rotors echoed through the mountains, I looked back toward the boundary stone. The ancient petroglyphs glowed softly in the morning light, promises carved in stone 2 centuries ago, renewed in blood, holding fast for at least 1 more generation. The medical helicopter arrived 45 minutes after Chen's call, rotors beating the cold morning air as it settled into a clearing 200 yards from our position. Paramedics loaded Sarah first, her face gray from blood loss and hypothermia, but her eyes still alert, still tracking everything around her. Daniel went next, wrapped in shock blankets, crying silently as they strapped him to the stretcher. He'd survived physically, but the psychological damage would take longer to heal. Agent Chen and I stayed behind to secure the 3 suspects. We found them exactly where I'd left them at the boundary stone, collapsed in the snow, conscious but unable to move. Whatever power they'd borrowed from the entity was gone, burned away when I renewed the treaty. They looked small now, human, broken in ways that went beyond physical injury. As tribal rangers arrived to transport them, Darren Spotted Horse looked up at me. His eyes were his own again, brown and human, and filled with something that might have been relief. "Thank you for stopping us," he whispered. "We thought we were becoming something greater. We didn't understand what we were giving up until it was almost too late." Captain Running Crane arrived an hour later, coordinating the scene with FBI agents and tribal investigators. The line shack workshop was secured, evidence collected, statements taken. Darren, Kyle, and Marcus would face charges under both tribal and federal law. Murder, kidnapping, desecration of human remains, and a dozen other counts. They'd spend the rest of their lives in prison, and maybe that was mercy compared to what they'd been becoming. I spent 3 days in the hospital in Cutbank being treated for frostbite and exposure. Sarah was 2 rooms down, recovering from broken ribs, a punctured lung, and severe hypothermia. Agent Chen had somehow escaped with nothing worse than frostbitten fingers, though he told the hospital staff he was putting in for a transfer to warmer climates. He was lying. I saw him talking quietly with Captain Running Crane about protocols, about training, about how to prepare other agents for the things that existed beyond FBI classifications. 3 months passed. Winter released its grip on the northern Rockies, and by April, the snow had retreated to the high peaks. Green grass pushed through the brown prairie. Wildflowers bloomed in the foothills. The Blackfeet reservation transformed from a landscape of ice and death into something that felt alive again, renewed. Alice Mad Plume called the ceremony for the spring equinox. The entire tribal council attended, along with every BLES officer, tribal rangers, medicine people from across the northern Rockies, and family members I barely remembered. They gathered at the Heart Butte boundary stone, where the petroglyphs still glowed faintly in sunlight, where my blood had renewed a treaty 200 years old. I wore traditional clothing Alice had prepared, standing before the assembled crowd while she spoke in Blackfeet, then English, explaining what had happened that night, explaining what I'd done, explaining what it meant. Ryan Whitefeather walked the boundary his grandmother walked before him. He renewed the treaty with his blood. He chose protection over power. She approached me carrying a necklace made of turquoise, bear claws, and small leather pouches that I knew contained protection medicine. I name you Keeper of the Boundary, the first since your grandmother left in 1968. May you walk in balance. May you protect our people. May you remember that some laws are older than countries, and some duties are carried in blood. She placed the necklace around my neck, and I felt the weight of it, not just physical, but spiritual, generational. The responsibility of maintaining boundaries, of protecting people from things they didn't believe in, of walking between worlds that most pretended didn't touch. The protocols on the station wall had been updated. Captain Running Crane and I worked with Alice to add 2 more rules based on what we'd learned. Rule 8. The boundary stone at Heart Butte must be visited by an officer with Mountain Singer blood during every new moon phase. Proper offerings must be made to maintain the treaty. Rule 9. Officers with Mountain Singer bloodline must carry sacred protection bundles at all times while on duty. Bundles must be blessed by a recognized medicine person every 3 months. Sarah recovered fully, back on duty by March. We'd handled 4 more cases together that fell into what we now officially termed special circumstances. A family in Star School reporting a shapeshifter stealing livestock. Tracks found near Bab that showed transformation patterns. Strange lights in the mountains that turned out to be something calling to children. And a case where a young man had tried to follow the skin taker path, and we'd intervened before he killed the family member required for transformation. The work continued. The boundary held, but it required constant vigilance. On a warm April afternoon, I drove out to the tribal cemetery where Emma was buried. Her grave was on a hillside overlooking the plains, with the mountains visible in the distance. I'd been coming here every week since the ceremony, and each time it got a little easier. I placed fresh wildflowers on her headstone, sat on the grass beside it, and spoke to her like I used to when we were kids, and she'd listen to all my problems without judgment. You tried to warn me in those last calls, said things were hunting on the highway. I thought you meant drunk drivers or drug smugglers or something I could understand with my Denver PD training. I'm sorry I didn't understand. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I touched the headstone, sun-warmed granite. But I understand now why you came back to the reservation, why you stayed despite knowing something was hunting here, because this is home, because our people need protection, because the blood remembers, and some duties you can't run from no matter how far you go. The wind moved through the grass, carrying the smell of sage and wildflowers. For just a moment, I felt something that might have been Emma's presence, approving, finally, at peace. My radio crackled. Sarah's voice. Unit 7, we need you at dispatch. Got a call about missing hikers near Marias Pass, mile marker 34. Witnesses report finding tracks that don't make sense. Captain wants us to respond. Mile marker 34. Where Emma died. Where we'd confronted the entity. The boundary was holding, but things still tested it, pushed against it, looked for weaknesses. I stood, touched Emma's headstone one more time. Duty calls. I'll tell you about it next week. Sarah was waiting at the station, already loading gear into our patrol vehicle. She'd been cleared for full duty, but still moved carefully, protective of ribs that had taken months to heal. She caught me watching and smiled. I'm fine, Ryan. Let's go to work. She drove while I checked the equipment, making sure we had extra protection bundles, sage, corn pollen, everything we might need if this turned into another special circumstance case. The protocols were second nature now, not superstition, but survival instructions earned through experience and blood. As we headed north on Highway 89 toward the mountains, Sarah glanced at me. Here we go again. Yeah, here we go. The ba
clung to the air. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. I tried to move, but my muscles screamed in protest. A man in a dark suit was standing at the foot of my bed, his arms crossed, his eyes unreadable. He wasn't the type of person you'd expect to find in a hospital room. His presence was cold, clinical. "You're lucky to be alive," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. "Taylor?" I croaked. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he looked at me with an expression that made my stomach churn. "Missing," he said, his voice almost too casual. "Your footage. Classified." I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. Everything felt heavy. They showed me the footage, the official version, the one they wanted me to see, the one they wanted me to believe, the one where I made it out, where I was lucky, where Taylor's disappearance was a mystery that could be solved with time. But I've seen the tape. Not the one they showed me. The real one. The one that came to me weeks later in a plain, nondescript envelope with nothing but a single VHS tape inside. No return address, no notes, just Project Rake, file number 1. Do not duplicate. I didn't hesitate. I watched it. The tape was almost identical to the one I'd seen before, but there were moments in it, moments they didn't show me. The final frame, right before the screen went black, showed me, frozen in fear. My face was pale, my mouth open in a scream that never made it out. And it was right there, inches away from me. Its teeth were bared, too sharp to be real. Its eyes, those burning white eyes, stared into mine as if it knew me, as if it had always known me. Then the screen cut out, leaving only static. But in that static, I heard it. Tap, 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 3 slow, deliberate knocks. And then the tape ended. I sat there for hours, staring at the black screen, my hands shaking so badly I thought I might break the tape. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The silence of the room felt too thick, like the air was waiting for something else to happen. 2 nights later, it came to me. A knock. Software quiet. Tap, tap, tap. Not on the door, not on the window, on the wall. It had found me again.